Hello, my name's Tim Lawrence. I'm the Edexcel Psychology Subject Advisor, and this is the first in a series of short videos which are basically repeating some training that we've delivered for teachers of GCSE Psychology in April 2022, which we hope will also be useful for students preparing for their exams. And this one is focused on the feedback that our examiners wrote on the 2022 exam series. So I'm going to go quite quickly through these slides. If you want to read them, then please be ready to pause the video to save time. So if anyone does want a quicker summary of what we fed back, then they can just watch it. And if you want to read the document in full, then it's publicly available on our website any day now. So paper one feedback from the principal examiner starts by saying that actually short AO1 questions have generally been answered well, as you might expect. But short answer questions which test both AO1 knowledge and understanding and AO2 application were much more variable, and there's two quite useful examples on this slide. Now, in the first of these, the first mark available on the mark scheme, which is for AO1 knowledge of the multi-store model, was quite well done, and students generally got that, but not many of them got the second mark for applying that to Pablo. So it's important to recognise that in a question with context like this, then there's 1 mark of each. And in some questions, and the second one here, question 19 on paper 1 last summer, is a good example of this. They generally applied this to Josh well, but didn't get the mark for the AO1 knowledge relating to sex differences. So AO2/3 questions, quite similar. So these ones about strengths and weaknesses. Some of these were quite accessible, so students did quite well on question 13B, but they struggled with 4B. Bit of a more challenging topic perhaps, but well worth practicing and looking at this style of question, where 2 of the marks available are for AO3 and therefore justification or exemplification, so showing why a strength is a strength and a weakness is a weakness. So this is a style of question where certain students last summer had clearly practiced these quite a lot and got quite good at them, and other students really didn't know how to answer them. So worth just thinking how well prepared you are if you're a student, or how well prepared your students are if you're a teacher watching this. There will be questions like this one which give results of an experiment, and a conclusion is asked for in the question, and it's just a skill, thinking like a psychologist, which sometimes when you're trying to revise a lot of content or cover a lot of content as a teacher, you might sort of pass over this kind of skill. So again, improvements to practicals stood out to our principal examiner as something which students found difficult. So here's a good example of that. And finally, for paper 1, before we move on to paper 2, we've got some feedback on the 9 markers. There's always 2 9 markers at the end of the paper, and they have some context to them, but these were the actual questions. And if you want to find out more about how to prepare students for, or how to answer if you are a student, these extended response questions, then other videos in this same playlist summarising the training we've recently delivered are there for that. Paper 2 feedback. So really key one here. Not many students, I don't think, made this mistake last summer, but I think it's easy for teachers to take this for granted that everyone knows that they only have to answer 2 of the option sections on paper 2. Some students won't have seen necessarily a mock paper with all of the sections in it. Under pressure in the exam, they might not read all of the instructions, and they might actually try to answer all the questions even though they've not learnt those other topics. So that's worth stressing. Only just skip straight to the 2 topics that you've been taught for the optional section. So application to scenario-based questions, another thing which some candidates have clearly got really quite good at over the course of their GCSE, and others find very difficult. So a key one to think about in the run-up to exams. So linking to the stimulus material, and there's some good examples in this series of questions here, where the question says, in her investigation, for her investigation, in his investigation. It's really important that the student doesn't just mention Juliet or Jamie, but they actually think about their study and how they can apply their knowledge to what they're actually trying to find out. So here we have a good example, like randomly selecting or randomly allocating participants. How would you do that? Well, here we've actually got a link to the fact that this was a study of 17-year-olds. So it's thinking about, in the context of that study, how she could randomly sample them. And there's a similar example here for Jamie, again linking it to what he's actually studying, which is authority figures and obedience. And I mentioned this, I think, just now, but the name is not enough. You need to go further with the linking when there's a context that needs to be referred to, and actually think about some details about that study or about that behaviour that's been given in the question. So a bit more feedback here on the extended response questions, this time for paper 2. So the evaluation is the really challenging bit, and really important for students to be aware that on all of these questions, the 9 markers on paper 1, the 9 markers in the option topics on paper 2, and the 12 marker on methods, there will always be all 3 of these assessment objectives assessed. So a third of the marks for knowledge, a third of them for application to whatever context has been given, but the final third, quite difficult to do, the hardest skill, but really worth having a go at, is the evaluation strengths and weaknesses. And there's some other general advice here which is really important, which is that additional paper must be used for any bits of answers that won't fit in the lines on the answer booklet. If students write outside of the box or on different pages, then it's quite difficult to make sure that the correct examiner gets hold of their responses, and they may well not, because all of these papers are scanned and then individual questions are electronically marked on an online system by examiners. So that's the end of the quick run through the sort of highlights of the exam report from last summer. And this is the title slide for the next part of the presentation, which will be in another video in this playlist. Thank you for watching.